All right, well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started since we have a little bit of housekeeping before the program starts anyway. First, I'd like to welcome everybody who's attending this webinar on behalf of the Paterson Museum. My name is Heather Garside, and I'm the Curator of History here at the museum. Today, I am very excited to be moderating this program, which includes the museum's director, Giacomo DiStefano, and Marissa Figlar of the Passaic County Historical Society, who's also joining us. And this program is in conjunction with an exhibit that the museum currently has on display of photographs from both the Paterson Museum's collection and the Passaic County Historical Society's collection related to Wright's Aeronautical in Paterson. We also would like to thank our partner, the Paterson Museum Foundation. It's actually their Zoom account that we're using tonight, and they have the fancy webinar accounts. We want to thank them for letting us use it. So that we're able to record tonight's session and be able to present the program. So, as this is a photo ID session, it's going to be a lot more informal than normal historical programs that you may have attended. And we're going to try and open up the floor as much as possible to hear our attendees' contributions, because tonight you are the historians, you are the one with the knowledge, and we are reaching out to you so that you can help share that knowledge with us. And identify some of these photos. That being said, I'm just going to provide and share with you really quick so that we're all on the same page as far as Zoom goes. There are just a few simple cues that we're going to ask. I'm going to be able to unmute everybody who has a microphone at home if you have something to contribute. So the only way I'm going to be able to know that you have something to say is if you hit the raise hand button, and then I'll be able to see that you've raised your hand, and I will call on everybody and give them an opportunity to speak as the photos come up. If you don't happen to have a microphone at home, that's okay. You can also communicate with us and let us know everything that you want to share with us through the chat, and we'll be able to read that out so that everyone can hear what you're contributing. And also, we've discovered in our practices that when I unmute our attendees, sometimes your microphone is also muted in Zoom on your end. So just make sure that you check that up arrow with the mute selection so that we can be sure that we can hear you when we unmute you. All right, so with that out of the way, I am going to go ahead and introduce Giacomo DiStefano, the Paterson Museum's director, and he's going to just give us a quick overview of history of the Wright Aeronautical Corporation.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate everyone who's joined us tonight and spend their evening and assist us in this wonderful project. Get to my PowerPoint, and we will begin. Okay, this will be a brief history on the Wright Aeronautical Corporation, and you can't not help but tie it into the golden age of aviation. Wright's Aeronautical, you can still find their memorabilia and items such as the lovely postcard we have here on eBay. If you have one, you're quite lucky. It's rich in history. Monetarily, maybe only worth about $10, but it's the rich in history that's the best. I wish I would have gave you the flip side of it, because you would have seen it was actually written by a young boy who was thanking Miss Haverman for sending him candy. But I figure that's a little off track. But we still have these from, this is from 1948, the postcard was dated. But before we begin with the Wright's Aeronautical Corporation, I'm really interested in how it came to Paterson. So we'll start with their roots. And of course, they really, just as their name indicates, they're part of the Wright brothers' original company, the Wright Company. And of course, they were the ones who pioneered flight. And the Wright Aeronautical Corporation really is steeped with aviation royalty from start to finish. You know, we're all familiar with the famous 1903 flight, December 17th at Kitty Hawk. That's actually Orville at the controls, Wilbur's on the side. And it's from these two brothers after 50,000 years of trying to figure out how to get man into air that they did it. And on the right side, you see from their bicycle shop, if you remember, they were, you know, they owned 4 or 5 bicycle shops before they moved over into developing airplane engines and airplanes themselves, in which they would form the Wright Company in 1909. The building on the bottom is their Dayton Wright Company. And that was actually the largest aviation and the first aviation factory of its kind. Again, they were the pioneers, and you can't stress that enough. In 1909, of course, they first sought to secure military contracts. There's always money in the big industry complex when it comes to, financing peacetime operations, not just war. But the Army was ready to dive in. And so Wrights again started developing their planes, which you see in 1909 rather. And then these are several models that they continued over the years throughout the run. Actually, they were, for the ones who started it, they were at the forefront of aviation technology. And then their focus sort of changed, and they really started focusing on protecting their patent. And the real businessman behind it really was Wilbur. And he would run the business and spent a lot of time in court enforcing Wright's patents. Because again, they were the first, and all of a sudden planes are starting to come out everywhere, especially in 1909. And one of their main competitors of all people was Glenn Curtiss. That one shot in the lower bottom where you see the people on the beach, that's actually his flyer testing over at Atlantic City. In 1909, the very first aviation meet in Europe took place, and the Wright brothers thought, they had the plane. Glenn Curtiss showed up, and he won the meet. And that really set off a bunch of litigation that really wasn't resolved. It starts in 1909, right after, Curtiss comes out on top, and really isn't going to be resolved until World War I. Interesting enough, he was also, he started off as bicycle manufacturing, but it quickly turned over to motorcycles. And for motorcycles, he set a land speed record in 1907 on a beach in Florida at 136 miles an hour on that V8, bicycle converted to motorbike. I mean, pretty scary. But again, these are men of adventure, needless to say. Another famous aviator, and I love how he financed his business, was Glennell Martin. He was out in Santa Ana, California, and being in Hollywood area, he was able to actually raise some money. He would do some stunt piloting, as well as he offered his services for the movies. And here he is, sitting next to America's sweetheart, Mary Pickford, from the silent era and A Girl of Yesterday. The little plane that you see on the right was actually one that he was manufacturing in 1913 for Pancho Villa in Mexico. And he was doing all right, but he got the attention of the Wrights company, and they figured we should be starting merging. Now, the merger really begins because of disinterest by Orville. His brother Wilbur had died in 1912, and by 1915, Orville sort of lost interest in, especially the business end, because he had to take over. He was more interested in developing engines and the technical than running the company. And in 1915, he sells off his shares, and the rest of the stock and the investors look for a new partner, and they find it in Glenn Martin. And this becomes one of the first major mergers of the day. In 1916, it was a $10 million deal, which today would be worth about $242 million. And it really was about 4 or 5 companies, but the 3 main was the Wright Company, Glenn Martin's company, and the Simplex Automobile Company that was based in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And they were using the same engine that the French were developing, the Hispano-Suiza, for their vehicle. So once they merged, they relocated their operations and they settled in New Brunswick. And they would end up during the war years with about 2.3 million square feet of industrial space. Again, the main engine they were making was the Hispano-Suiza, an 8-cylinder liquid-cooled engine. Liquid-cooled is very important because it was pretty reliable, but it was also pretty heavy, and it did have cooling issues down the road. These are some of the main planes they would use, including on the lower right, the Curtiss Jenny, again, their main competitor at one time. Now, they did a reorganization after the war. During the war years, they were producing so many engines. They had 15,000 people employed in New Brunswick, but once it went to come back to peacetime production, they only needed about 350 people, and they reorganized and they moved up and relocated to Paterson as the Wright Aeronautical Corporation. Although they still were making the Hispano-Suiza, which now was dubbed the Wright's Hispano or just the Wright engine. And so they were still involved with this liquid-cooled engine, and one of their biggest contracts was for the United States Navy. Now, the Navy was doing, besides shore patrol, that you see on the lower left here, we have the USS Langley, which is the very first aircraft carrier. Now, one of the problems they were worried about, engine overheating, over water isn't really too good when you got to land it somewhere. In the European theater, when they were fighting during World War I, you could land in a field, but of course, crashing in the water was not ideal. And the engine they found to be the most reliable really was this air-cooled engine by the Lawrence Aero Engine Company, which was based in California as well. They really loved his design. It was far more efficient, but the only thing was Lawrence wasn't that large. And what the Navy did is they really kind of forced Wright's hands because they withdrew all their contracts for liquid cooled engines and were pushing air cooled engines. And if Wrights wanted to keep those couple of hundred engine order, they really had to adopt this, and they absorbed the Lawrence Company in 1923. And they, as you can see, they were advertising it. And he brought that air cooled engine, which the Navy really wanted. And this air cooled engine really would redirect aviation history for the next 40 to 50 years before the jet age really takes over. The air-cooled engine really was the premier engine for the day when we want looking for endurance, speed, and altitude. So, you know, they were originally advertised, they were still building the liquid cooled, but they really morph over to the air-cooled engines, which started with the J3, and you see the production assembly line on the Whirlwind engines. Wright's actually made two types of engines, Whirlwinds, and the larger were Cyclones, the more powerful. And these really were the difference in, again, traveling around the world was this air-cooled engine. Some of the famous flights that they were able to do was when Commander Richard Byrd flew over the North Pole in 26 and reached the South Pole. There was some dispute whether he made it to the North Pole. He may have turned back about 150 miles with an oil leak, but he definitely was the very first one to make it to the South Pole in 29. Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic in 1928, although in that time she was only a passenger, but she wrote a book and that perpetuated or propelled her career. And she would do a solo transatlantic flight herself as well. And of course, the most famous engine that ever came out of Wright's, and it was the J5, again, the advanced version of Lawrence's engine that powered Colonel Lindbergh from New York to Paris nonstop in the first solo transatlantic flight. I mean, this was celebrated, of course, when he went down Fifth Avenue and the Avenue of Heroes. They had the ticker tape parade when he came back from Paris. But in Paterson, they were celebrating the next day as they were driving around a model of that engine that you see here running down along Ellison Street by the Hamilton Club in its day. As for aviation, that was probably the most distinct flight. A month later, Chamberlain would fly from the same Roosevelt Field in New York, where Lindbergh took off, and he would travel to Berlin, 4,000 miles. But Lawrence was recognized. Since 1911, the most prestigious award for aviation aeronautics achievement was the Collier Award, which was started by the founder of Collier magazine, and it continues to this day. In 1927, they didn't recognize Lindbergh and his historic flight, but they really recognized Lawrence for bringing the air-cooled engine. As for Lawrence, he really hoped to get some fame from this. I mean, he would become the president of Wright's as well. But, you know, one of his friends remarked to him by stating, well, you know, nobody remembers Paul Revere's horse's name either. So, but the Wright engine made the big difference. And while doing my research, I found one famous flyer who was a pretty local girl, and I just loved her title of Eleanor Smith, the Flying Flapper of Freeport. Now, she would fly endurance records 26 hours, but the one distinction she has, and she became a pilot at 17, she took lessons at the age of 10, but she flew under all four bridges of the East River in New York. And actually this, you know, she was going to do this. She wasn't really trying to do a big publicity stunt, but word got out that she was doing this. As a result, they had, you know, magazines and newspapers ready to record her as she flew under each bridge. Well, she almost lost her license if it wasn't for the intervention of the mayor of New York, Jimmy Walker, who gave her a 10-day suspension. Otherwise, she could have had her license withdrawn. She was so significant that in 1930, pilots voted her to be the #1 woman pilot, better than Amelia Earhart. No offense to Amelia Earhart. And one of my favorite stories, of course, is when Howard Hughes flew around the world. Again, or the top half of it at least. What did he use in his Lockheed airplane? Again, Wright's engines powered it. Now, this is up to 1929. You know, they're continuing to produce, but there's going to be another great merger. And of all people, the merger is really with the Glenn Curtiss corporations, which was the Curtiss Motor and the Aeroplane Company, and about 11 others. This was at the time in 1929, the largest aviation company in the world. Today's money, we're about an $11 billion corporation is what that merger generated. And Curtiss was still concentrating in, he was originally from Hammondsport in Buffalo, where they were headquartered on building airplanes. And the airplanes really did continue with the Curtiss name, but the Wright Aeronautical Corporation really was the engine building. And they were always referred to for their engines as Wrights. And this again, they were the largest company. You see part of their footprint in Paterson. Plant number 1 is right on by Getty and Madison Avenue. And really, that building started off as 90,000 square feet. By the time they would leave, they were just as large as they were when they were in New Brunswick. Had been about 2.3 million square feet. You see plant number 2 there. That was originally part of the American Locomotive Company, which went out in the 1920s. So they were able to occupy that building. And to the, if you look down the street from number 1 to the lower right, you see the large buildings there. That was the test cells. And all these buildings still stand to this day. So we do have some remnants of this industry in Paterson. Of course, one of the biggest pushes that they were able to make was for the war effort. Wright's was actually the second largest manufacturer based on value of product behind General Motors. And they had employed, and they had plants out in Cincinnati, Ohio, Paterson, they were all over. They had about 180,000 people, and they produced for the war effort 142,000 engines combined, and about 77,000 of those were produced in the Paterson plants alone, mainly for the B-17, B-25 bomber program. You remember the Doolittle raids? They were powered by the R-2600, an air-cooled 14-cylinder. It's 2 rows of engines. And the B-17 Flying Fortress, which saw extensive service in the European theaters. Again, Wright's had 3 shifts going. We had our Rosita Riveters. I mean, everyone worked for Wright's at one point or another. One other aside, which I didn't realize it when I first started all of this, is that their tank engines were, converted 975 engines. We have one inside the museum right now. It was similar in size to Lindbergh's original engine. So they weren't only using it in planes, but they're also using it to power the M3 Lee. It was the Lee or the Grant, and then the M4 Sherman tanks, which was the Sherman was the more prevalent one during World War II. Then, of course, once the war ended, they go and shift their operations again. Now they're going back into, commercial aviation, and probably one of the most successful, important planes for, personal travel was the DC-3. And the DC-3 was powered by engines similar to the same ones that were powering, the B-17 bomber program. Now, while that returned to normal, Wright's was no longer going to be working in Paterson. One of Paterson's problems that I've always noted, whether it was the silk industry, the locomotive industry, is we're only 8.4 square miles. Our factories are 4 and 5 stories because we just don't have the footprint to lay out 90,000 square feet. And of course, production runs better in one single line. In 1942, the United States government had built this special plant in Woodridge for the production of the R-3350, which was the B-29 bomber engine for the war in the Pacific, especially. After Wright's had closed, they consolidated, the war closed rather, they consolidated all their efforts to Woodridge, where they could get everything under one roof. And as I found out, about 140 acres of what Wright's were, including 30 acres in one building alone. This photo is about 10 years ago as they've redeveloped it all. Most of Wright's in Woodridge is no longer standing, sadly. But you can see what was left of it in Paterson. But Wright's, really did make the world a smaller place, and the smaller place was done with their engines. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jack, for that presentation. It's a great way to get started. And now, really quickly, we have a little time. So if anybody does have any questions for Jack, we can entertain a couple questions before we move on to the photo ID session. Just go ahead and either raise your hand or you can enter a question in the chat for us.
This was the shorter version of about a 45-minute presentation. You didn't think I could get it done in less than 15 minutes. I know. Neither did I. Hope I didn't talk too fast.
Well, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions for you, Jack. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to introduce the next speaker. So we are very pleased to introduce our partner. Marissa Figlar is representing the Passaic County Historical Society, and she is going to be presenting some of their photographs to be identified. Take it away, Marissa.
Beautiful. Hello. I'm a research specialist for Passaic County Historical Society, and much of my job right now, other than genealogical research, is digitizing the Curtiss-Wright collection that we have many boxes of. We've already scanned and, transcribed up to maybe 7,000 pictures already. However, a lot of these photos that we've received, while they're beautiful and they tell tales of, our history, well, Curtiss-Wright's history, there was little to no documentary support in identities or captions, but nonetheless, they're wonderful photos that hopefully, the help of you, will be able to identify either engines, products, or persons. And many people of our area have worked for Curtiss-Wright, or somebody's grandfather, neighbor, friend. Excuse me. So then, let us begin. After I thank Fred J. Brotherton Charitable Foundation, without them having granted us this opportunity, we wouldn't have been able to digitize any of this. Well, most of it at least. And so we are extremely grateful for them. Now let us begin. This is a photo of an unidentified male with what was written on the photo, Mr. Van Sleet. He's with a propeller and the engine on a Fokker question mark. Now, we don't know the location of where this plane was being worked on. Neither do we know any individuals who worked with Mr. Van Sleet. So we would love to know if anybody has a relative or friend or family, family member, anybody who's worked with Mr. Van Sleet that could give us some hint as to the location of where these Fokker planes were being worked on. And you know what, this is an interesting photo as well, even though it is a little bit blurry. It's one in a whole set of only one of them. It's 6 individuals in a canoe on a lake. I'm not sure if this was an event for, say, a hydroplane, or if this was maybe an outing that Curtiss-Wright Corporation sponsored for its employees. It looks fun, so that's something special, but again, we have no captions or identities of who these people are. And while we can't really see, we could at least maybe from the public gain, some insight into that. Here we have a photo of 8 unidentified men up until Heather and Jack actually helped us out. They noticed that there was these nice door grates behind them is Paterson City Hall. And Charles Lawrence that Jack was talking about, he's the vice president of Wright Aeronautical Company, right on the very end on the right. So we have an identity here, but the other 3 in this image are currently without any names. And then the other 4, this man happens to be Mayor Hinchcliffe. He was operating from, I believe, up until 1937. I think that's when his term was over, but the rest of them, again, are unidentified. We have this adorable photo of 2 women, 2 unidentified females that may or may not be related. They do have, similar attributes, but we're not sure as to the location of this picture. I'm assuming it's going to be in the same lake area since they were close in the filing. But we would love to know who these women are, as well as this man. He's seen here. He's most likely a pilot, of course, but he's seen here receiving something from a man in a suit. The photo itself is taken out of Columbus, Ohio. the airplane division took a picture of him. So we know that it might be in that region. However, we don't know who the pilot is and what award he's receiving. But we do know that the plane is a P-87. So that's one bit of information that we could understand and then get to piece together this info. An unidentified pilot climbing into the cockpit of the P-87. And what I do want to mention is that most of these photos are going to be with multiples, but blown up in different portions of the photo, just so we could get closer views of each person. So they're working on the plane wing of a plane that I'm having trouble identifying. And these are some of the men that we also do not know a name of.
There are a lot of prototype pictures in here, aren't there, Marissa? Like one-off planes in this collection?
Yeah, yes. Well, there are many of those, but if there's any aeronautical, expert here that's watching for that sake, maybe it's kind of catching the eye. But it's not a complete lost cause. We might be able to figure out some things, but it's probably one of the prototypes. And this is an interesting photo. I didn't know where it was taking place at all, but there was a caption of they're in China. There's laborers loading ingots of tin. Apparently tin was a very, resourceful material. And these were being loaded as into the interior of a Curtiss C4 Commando. They were getting shipped from India, bound for the States, but much of it was flown out of China. So we have an idea of where this picture might have been taken, but we don't know who this guy is. And we would, if anybody recognizes him, that would be beautiful. But there are so many other servicemen that are unaccounted for with at least our documentation. Now remember, if you do see any person that you recognize, you could always write down and take note of people that you would like to mention or anything that you observe in the images, which Marissa? I think I already figured something out.
Marissa, I don't mean to cut you off, but the beauty of the internet, that one plane that was previous, the jet engine one, it looks like it was the Curtiss-Wright XF-87 Black Hawk.
Interesting. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
There you go.
Well, here I am just digitizing photos, and I really should be picking up the phone every now and then to just check these things out. But again, so these children are adorable. I'm sorry, I forgot. I got all excited because I realized that so many people could have been this brother and sister or set of friends that were little at one point, either meeting a pilot or with their father. And you know what, that's funny though. That's the exact, I think that might be the plane that he's flying to, what you just mentioned. So we're finding out a lot tonight already. This is great. So yes, this little duo is handing the pilot a pin or an award of some sorts, but we don't know who these individuals are, or if maybe one of the attendees was a little girl or a little boy and was able to experience this. So let's continue. We have men with the ingots and sand in a plain ridgen field. I don't know if they're helping with maybe building an airstrip or what have you, but this is definitely an experience I'm sure somebody's father or maybe yourself would remember having had you been there. So if you recognize any of these events, that would be ideal. Okay, so we have an unidentified male on an elephant. I mean, this is going to be overseas, maybe India or China, like they've mentioned in the caption on that one photo. But what a surreal experience to see that sight when you're just going about your daily routine. We have this man, an identified individual. He's standing in front of, I believe, the C-46 airplane. It has "We the People" written on the nose. And apparently what they are doing is, unloading a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine from a Curtiss C-46 Commando at Panagar, India. Luckily, we have some of the context of the situation, but not this man's name or who he is. Thankfully, lots of the photos came in original folders that already had a title that that leads to much of the information we could imagine of it. This is entitled P-87 Convoy. So this truck behind us, behind these men, with the canvassing over some objects, might be really covering up airplane parts of a P-87, and they're on their way somewhere. There's, I think, 9 individuals altogether, none of which we know their names. There's 4 males here and 5 on this end, and they're crews and servicemen. And here are some of them again. I thought this was cool. This is them taking the convoy through a toll. So you see a little state police car on the right and a trooper walking along. I mean, I'm sure somebody remembers having been in this traffic. That's pretty unique to see, because it's not just this one, this one canvas truck. It's probably a line of many, and who knows how fast they're having to go. And here's another image. I think that they're going down to Delaware, where there was a Curtiss-Wright, not a plant, but some building of some sort. So this might be I-95 in its early days. This could be along the road in New Jersey or Delaware itself, but there are other photos that kind of point to this having been a trip to Delaware. But again, if somebody has any information likewise, then absolutely. And to the contrary. This is from Paterson's plants. We have a cafeteria image where there's workers just at their leisure on their lunch break. I thought these were really special because you never know who's hanging out. And we're going to be seeing a lot of this lunch lady. I don't know how, but she's shown up in so many photos that eventually I started to recognize her as being probably the matriarch of Curtiss-Wright Corporation's lunchtime. I mean, these lines that span the whole cafeteria, just to hopefully they're given enough time for lunch, because that would have been a wait and a half. But it's always this lady that comes through in every picture. So she's really belle of the ball. And a serene image of, I thought this was pretty cool. So if anybody's father would ever have to, before coming home for dinner, have to clean up at work, they had these communal wash bins and showers, because really the work was kind of dirty. You had all this, metal filaments and everything to wash off. So those pictures of the locker rooms, I wonder what was that like, having to go through that every day with going home, but then this rigmarole of activity that you have to do prior to that. An unidentified man, though he is a little blurry, with calipers measuring some sort of, maybe a cylinder, but I don't know the part's name, and I would love for people to contribute that information as well. Another man taking what is polished metal and on a mill or a lathe. Forgive me for not knowing better, but he's making, I guess, ribbing on these parts in order for them to be used in an aircraft. So anybody with information really can just hold that aside and take the number down of the photo, and please do bring it on over, because you may know, and then I would love to find out. There she is. Nearly every picture almost, I keep finding her. This is a Ford tri-motor passenger plane with unidentified individuals again. Here, maybe a body of water. However, it is also in the Paterson plants folder. So this is going to, unless it was unsorted or sorted in a funny way, this could be Hasbrook Heights if that is not a body of water and just, the glistening of the airfields. But these are people we want to know about, and the location as well. For unidentified individuals, and 5, it seems to be the same event with the tri-motor. And actually, this might be telltale too, because this is taken, I think, between 1926 and 1928. It might just be a Ford event. I don't know if that's the case, but there's 3 unidentified individuals in front of a biplane that we would love to get an ID on, and perhaps where this Ford event took place, because you could see in the background the emblems on signs, etc. So 3 unidentified males next to a corrugated fuselage of a plane, and 2 unidentified with at least a caption on this one. It's from Curtiss Aeronautical Motor Company, but it's the Challenger engine used in the endurance flight for the St. Louis Robin record. The Curtiss Robin plane. And then this is 8 individuals we don't know much about. However, we do know that it is out of, I believe, New York. And this is, wait, forgive me for this, Colonel Schneider Cup team. So we know it's a team for a flying event. It's just that everyone else we don't know in this picture. Perhaps you recognize one of them. This is a man with a drill press. I don't know the correct name for it. It's an earlier version. It's very heavy machinery too. He's boring a hole in something. I'm not well equipped with that kind of, at least the terminology. So anything having to do with labor, any knowledge there is helpful as well, just to get a better caption going for each of these photos. In another ID session, I saw that this picture was in it, and somebody helped out and mentioned Mother's Day. So I don't know if that's to the affirmative or not, but I thought this was a cute picture, although a little bit battered. So another set of men that we don't know much about. Perhaps you know the event or the airplane even. It might be, what is that? A hell diver. But again, the ones in the back, we don't know. So that would be something wonderful to contribute. So the locality that this is in, it is for a Hispano engine. They're all out in exhibit. Has anybody ever walked through one of these? It's pretty cool.
I'm wondering if that wasn't a World's Fair or some kind of exhibit like that.
I do. I mean, because there is the company that, what is it? The company that took these pictures. They do have one that listed New York, but also Chicago. And I kind of thought maybe it was in Chicago and maybe a World's Fair. But if
Or
anyone,
some kind of trades fair. That's, you know, it looks like a setup expecting to be, you know, exhibited for that sort of style of event.
yeah, those are cool shows to go to too. So yes. And any memories of these things, it's just cool to listen to. Any memories of maybe a dad or grandpa working on the airplane tails, buffing them? Pretty nice. And then we have unidentified male here. I'll give you a second to read this caption. So, or if not, I will. It's an unidentified technician in the experimental engine laboratory at Caldwell, New Jersey's propeller division.
That's actually a really good point at which to mention to Marissa that this collection, although it's from the Paterson plant, the photos kind of really cover the whole organization, right? Like you've got quite a few pictures in your collection that are Caldwell, and some of the sort of, I think they're all considered sort of the greater Paterson factory complex. So they're not just the two sites that Jack talked about, but there's some of the others that were in our New Jersey area and further afield as well, because they're all, you know,
exactly. This is
photos.
So a lot of the press photos, they're going from Washington. You'll see coming up, we're going to have Boeing Stratocruisers that were made out in Seattle. We've got Ohio, Illinois, all throughout the country. We do have pictures of them in this slideshow. But regarding the plants of the region, yeah, just not only Paterson, but Woodridge. I believe that there's, what is it? Carlstadt. Let me see. Woodridge, Carlstadt, Paterson, Caldwell. But so many plants just in this small little region alone. It's amazing. That's why I think that there's so many people that wound up working for them, because they really did. You'll see later, they have their own almost total institution within, that's how huge they were. You know, if they had their own bowling teams, their own basketball teams, their own hospital. It was really no wonder why people have spent their whole lives working for them, because it truly did kind of seem to take care of you.
Yeah, definitely a community.
So another unidentified technician. And one of these, this is out of Caldwell also, where they have at the other end, they're testing a propeller. So imagine the wind in that. I thought this was a cool photo as well. So we have unidentified males for the most part, but this does come with a caption of a Lieutenant General Stilwell and his 14th Air Force Fighter Squadron. So we know at least this. And this is in front of a P-40 pursuit plane. And this is on an air base in China. However, if anybody recognizes any of them, that's what's important. Then we have the installation of a Madsen 765. I'm not sure how to speak about ammunition too much, but and guns, weaponry, but it's being installed in the wing of a plane on a Curtiss Hawk. And then we have these men. I believe the caption came with it, yes. So I'm going to read you this caption. It's the 4th Marine Air Wing, round trip, a Curtiss transport, the 4th Marine Air Wing on Saipan loads up with rations for assault forces on nearby Tinian after evacuating a load of wounded to Saipan base hospitals. Tons of food and many casualties were handled on commando shuttle ships across the 4-mile channel. And there's all these men on a wet beach and some other identified men under the nose and wing of a commando. And this plane in the background, we are not sure of. So this is an image on the interior of the plane demonstrating how big it was really, how much it was able to carry. However, the men along the interior's walls are unidentified, and perhaps you'll be able to recognize one of them.
Marissa, were a lot of these military photos all filed together? Because you said you had the, the original filing system. So were they like kind of all the military stuff in one section and then some of the domestic stuff?
So that's the thing. I forgot to mention that what I'm doing is I'm going, it's easy for me, but then also just to show it kind of as it was filed, while there is that sparse few that were kind of jumbled, not together, but throughout, like hence what I was talking about with the lunch lady. She shows up pretty much everywhere throughout, accidentally. It wasn't my my doing, but she's definitely everywhere. And this is in filing order. So when you're seeing spats of servicemen, that's going to be for the most part all of the service photos. I meant to make it more exciting, I'm sorry. But this is a pretty cool picture too. This is of the Boeing Stratocruiser now, made out in Seattle. A lot of promotional shots. So we have photo 58 did come with its caption, just to talk about the opulence of riding on that plane. Lower deck lounge allows Stratocruiser passengers unusual freedom out of the Boeing Airplane Company. Probably the most unusual single feature of the new 71-ton Boeing Stratocruiser is the luxurious and roomy lower deck lounge. So this is just in a you know, a passenger airplane with your circular staircase and the lower deck lounge from the main cabin. So it seats 14 persons. It has a snack bar and 5 sightseeing windows. And to go on, more things like rich fabrics, leather. You know, it feels like the tone of a fine club. So this is something that you don't see too much around anymore. And these are unidentified stewardesses of Stratocruisers seated in a cutaway of the fuselage of that plane. So it's 2 stories. And it's a pretty nice airplane, pretty cushy. But these are the women all wearing their own separate uniforms, as it was made for United Airlines, Northwest Airlines, American Overseas Airlines, Pan American World Airways System, and the British Overseas Airway Corporation with Scandinavian Airlines System. If you recognize any of these ladies, please do speak with us. And you know what else? Your own little powder room. If anybody recognizes, of course.
I'm just jealous of the legroom. You don't get that much legroom anymore.
I know you all, exactly that, your powder room and your downstairs lounge. All in I'm hoping this is not just like a flight to Orlando, because it's just nobody that much luxury. So now we are into most of our labor photos, and this is going to be the Paterson plant and Woodridge. We have females and males doing their work at engine stands. Very cute. I tried to blow it up as much as possible. Like I said, their own little hospitals. We have an unidentified woman and nurse seen here. Hopefully you could recognize either one. In another hospital setting, unidentified male and nurse. Here's a man with chips flying everywhere of metal particles. And I guess a mill / lathe. Somebody has to let me know, because I've been writing this down wrong the whole while, if that's the case. And she's, if I'm not mistaken, this might be the woman in the hospital bed. She looks similar, but she's also working on x-raying these parts. So we did have some caption about her. Yes, this is Z3 Department 743, where it's chem, x-ray, and lab. But she's x-ray. Test cell control board in front of all these little gauges of pressure. And
another question, Marissa. Now, most of these pictures are they all 8x10s, or do they come in various sizes?
okay, so these are going to be 4x5s.
Oh, okay. There are smaller pictures in the collection.
Yeah, so I tried my best to make them as big as possible without then distorting them. So these are all going to be 4x5 negatives, and these are the photos that came on top of little envelopes of negatives.
We have a hand raised. Hang on. Okay, Peter, I have unmuted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Peter Flood. I'm
Peter.
doing, I think, Marissa, you know who I am to some extent. I'm doing a lot of curation of the digital assets at the Aviation Museum.
Yes.
I'm recognizing a number of these pictures as you go through. You're going through them quickly. I do recognize this one. I didn't tag it, one of my metadata analysts tagged it, but this has to do with basically a plant, which was a control room, a control plant. It's just coming, but I may have more information on this. So I'm making notes as I go through.
That's great.
I think you have photo, like 67B, is that a photo number for you? Or
That's for me to recognize myself, because we figured accession number was going to be too much, but if
so
you
that's your
like,
catalog, that's your catalog number, right?
Yeah, if you refer to that number from the slide, she'll be able to.
All right.
which one's-
So I need to make some notes. I mean, part of the value I add to the museum is the metadata I do brings these things up almost instantaneously, but I have to put a specific word or something in. In fact, give me just 2 seconds. Because I know I had a discussion. Yeah, that's not working. Okay, so this is 67B. I'm going to make a note of these and.
yes.
Yes.
Well, if everybody could even, when they do notice something, recognize anything for that matter, if you look at the number on the top of the screen and always just let me know which one you're, putting
no,
your
I will.
interest in, that's what I'll be able to add to.
What's important for you to know is that, so the museum has an enormous amount of, like I recognize that picture, but they have an enormous amount of digital assets, photos, and printed documents and stuff. The value to that for us is a number of them, I don't know what percentage, like on the back of the photo or a separate piece of paper, identifies the people in it. Okay, so we've been able to identify a lot of people as it relates to these photos. I'm not saying that these are all, I know this one's a specific one. Here it is. Hold on.
Oh, yes, well, you see, that's the thing about what we were given. So we have boxes of photos without captions. And then from my understanding, other museums got boxes of captions and documents without the photos. So it really is a matter of matching up these accession numbers. And I'm sure that, you probably do have a lot of numbers and captions with the pictures that we don't have. And so that's important that we collaborate with people and, organizations. So.
No, so
good
I'll
to
make
look
some notes
into.
and I'll follow up with an email where we can have a discussion and stuff, okay? On that. I'm sort of in our, the folder on my database.
That would be great. But look, hold on, I just want to mention how this is cool too, about the look at the tool crib.
Yes, some of the previous ones from now I'm looking at were something called a fuel metering building. Okay,
Okay.
not
A
these
fuel metering.
necessarily, but one of the factories that Curtiss-Wright had, or Wright Aeronautical had to do with fuel metering and that type of science.
Peter, could you tell us a little bit because some of our attendees may not be as aware of your collection, just kind of the extent of your collection?
What's that?
Could you tell us a little bit about the extent of your collection?
It's extensive.
Yeah.
I had some statistics. So within the library at the museum, there's 6 file cabinets, okay? One file cabinet is completely photos. there was an attempt about 2 or 3 years ago, and they accomplished a lot, where they digitized the photographs in the folders, and they were actually organized to some extent. So I have folder numbers and then photos. I mean, that one I recognize. But so we're working through those, okay?
Mhm.
And we're uploading them to my media asset management system, which, not that this is important, but, you know, we're unique in our ability to apply metadata and create a really rapid search, depending on the metadata, as opposed to other media asset management systems. But we're also at this point wrestling with, you know, there's always a process to determine what the taxonomy and the right metadata to apply to a photo to do that. So that's our process we're going in. What I was saying is that the one file cabinet just has folder after folder of photos. And I don't remember the statistic, but I mean, there was over 100 photo folders with, you know, maybe 30 to 40 photos in each, and with information. And we're also able to put up in our system documents, because a lot of the photos are of documents and letters and other things. But the benefit is I can, the way we store it, I'm able to export an image, JPEG, immediately, and I could send it to you if I needed you to see it or whatever, particularly the documents. The other drawers in the file cabinets just have material after material of Curtiss-Wright, from, you know, mechanical manuals to correspondence to just, you know, and this is only a portion of what the museum has.
Yeah.
And then we also have, one of the things I'm doing, they have a number of VHS tapes, and I'm transforming those into digital files. So they'll be available as digital files, and there's a few that have to do with Curtiss-Wright. They'll be available as digital files, but we can also search them. We can actually search the videos in my system for certain things. So I wanted to be on, I'm seeing things, but it's clear to me that, you know, I have to double check some of this stuff, and then I can give you more information on some of them.
Yeah, we were aware of
That's
the collection. I
perfect.
didn't realize there was so much overlapping though.
But the other thing is that, just to give you some categories, I think I have an image or a photo of every plane they ever produced, okay? And, you know, most of the time, those pictures are clearly marked of what planes they are, whether it's a Hawk or whatever, or, and some other stuff. So that's all in there. It can be searched quickly. Like, you came back to me and said, do you have a Curtiss-Wright Hawk something or other? Boom, and I can send you a picture of it, okay?
That's great.
But the other thing is that I have a good number of photos of executives of Curtiss-Wright, like in front of the building, things like this. And we're starting, as we work through my process. My process is pro bono to the museum, so I have to fit it into my production schedule. So, but we're able to identify a lot of those executives from
This is
the
the
photo or additional material, okay?
Aviation Hall of Fame in Teterboro, correct?
What's that?
You're the Aviation Hall of Fame in Teterboro, correct?
Yeah, Teterboro, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that all of our
yeah.
attendees knew where you were coming
Doing this for Ralph, you know.
from. That's
He
great.
just got out of surgery for cancer, and he's doing very well. So
Good.
that was going on at the moment for the last 2 weeks.
I think this one is probably the drafting department, Marissa.
What's
We
that?
have this picture, I feel like might be the drafting department. We have a photo in the Paterson Museum collection that is of a woman. And it said in that caption that we had that she was the only woman in the drafting department. And if you look, I guess there's 2 women there, because I just noticed there's someone in the back. So I guess
Yes.
you can't assume that it's the woman that we have, but that definitely looks like the drafting department.
See, all of this would be helpful information, both with your museum and Peter, also with the Aviation Hall of Fame. We do have to collaborate more often on this, because I think that'll get everybody's collection finished.
Yeah.
But we did come to the ends of the photos that I needed help with. However, attendee contributors came through, and thank God were so helpful to provide their own photographs to share. So I'm going to show you some of those now.
Thank you very much to everybody who contributed some photos from their
All right,
families.
so you're done with your series of photos?
Yes.
Okay.
So I thank you all for sticking with me on this. I know
Yeah.
that it was a little bit long-winded.
I actually got on late because I was doing something. I thought it was starting at 7:30 and, you know, I screwed it up. So I'm sorry I wasn't on earlier. You're recording this?
Yeah, so what we're gonna actually do, and this is for everybody, we've been recording, we are gonna put it up on the Paterson Museum's YouTube channel, which we will be sending out a link to that channel to you all probably in a follow-up email tomorrow. And then once we have it on YouTube, please feel free to watch it again if you want to look more closely. at
No,
the pictures and
that's
pause.
That's
And
going
then
to be
we
much better for
also,
me.
Encourage, if anybody knows someone who missed tonight, but might be interested in the program, you can obviously share it as well. And that follow-up email is going to include Marissa's contact information. So if anybody does recognize somebody or goes back tomorrow and recognizes someone.
James, I have a number of, like James Romano, I know he's did a large number of them. So if I don't want to sound rude or anything, but one of you has PMF on.
Yes,
their-
sorry, because you missed the introduction. I'm Heather Garside. I'm the curator at the Paterson Museum.
You're with the Paterson Museum.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
And Marissa is with the,
Historical Society,
yeah.
Passaic County Historical.
and then Giacomo,
Jack.
Giacomo, you call me Jack.
All right, Jack.
Yeah, I'm the director at the Paterson Museum as well.
So you're the director, and then Patrick Burns is your director, right, Marissa?
He's no longer with the Passaic County Historical Society.
Oh, he's gone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You know,
Passaic County at large.
Yes, yeah, he works for the county now. All right, so Marissa, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the plan is that if the contributors would like to say a few words about their own photos, we're gonna let them go ahead, correct?
Yes.
So if you guys could just do me a favor, and if you see your own photos, give me a hand raise so I know who's who. All right.
And one more thing about what's at the museum. They did try to do some good work. They accomplished some good work, but I have an access file on probably most of the Curtiss-Wright material. And then I have an Excel file on most of the photos. So I have access to, so it is cataloged in these simple databases, but it makes my life a little easier applying the metadata to make it searchable in my system.
Yeah.
Can I share my screen for a second, or?
Well, if you want, we could always go through this afterwards as like a learning session for me, because I am very much interested in sharing, our
Well, I just wanted
getting back
to,
in contact, and
we can do that, probably set up a time to do that. I mean, I was just thinking if we could share the screen, I could take 2 minutes and show you what we have created, but maybe Marissa and I, we get on a Zoom call or Google Meet, and we could share screens and I can show you what we're doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and potentially too, if this is well received and people really want to, we could always do another photo ID session with different photos. And if the two of you wanted to team together and sort of
Yeah.
answer some of the unanswered questions, then we'd have, questions that maybe both of you had.
that'd be awesome.
I think there's a synergy there where we can both help each other.
Yeah.
No, so let's do that. I have your email, Marissa, and I'll send it to you. And hopefully in the next day, I maybe can pull up some information. So do you have a lot of people on, or?
Yeah, we have about 20 people who are attending. We had a lot more interest, but I think, as this thing happens, people didn't end up attending. But all right, now
Admirable what you're trying to do. It's probably,
yeah, I mean, we've done this. The Historical Society's done a few of these already. in person, but I think the Zoom's actually going to be the better way to do it because it means that people can share the photos across the internet a little bit better. But Peter, I'm going to go ahead and let Mark talk for a few minutes about his family photos, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
You, Peter.
Okay, Mark.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So the photos that I sent in, that's my grandfather, James Romano. He worked for Curtiss-Wrights from, I believe, 1942, maybe a little earlier, till 1972, when he retired. He worked in the Woodridge plant and he worked in Caldwell. He was in the propeller division. So I have his 2 service pins that I took a picture of, and it's on the toolbox that he used when he worked for Curtiss-Wrights for all those years. And in the toolbox are a lot of his tools that are marked X Lab or whatever he used them. They were engraved for, I guess, whatever departments he used them for. So, and I know he loved working there. He told me about the war years, but he loved working for Curtiss-Wrights, and that was his whole life. And that's, I remember the stories growing up when he was a kid. So my dad might be on watching. He probably doesn't have a mic to contribute, but he'll be happy to see his dad's picture up there. So
He raised his hand as well. So let me see if I can.
I don't know if he has a mic, but he might be able to chat.
Yeah, it says that you are muted, William, but if you can unmute yourself, if not, maybe you don't have a mic.
But I do have one question. The gentleman who was just speaking before, he said the name James Romano came up in a lot of his photos. So I know when you guys collaborate, if there'd be a way to maybe get some of those photos or share some of them, that'd be great.
Yeah, certainly, certainly.
Yeah, I would really appreciate that.
Absolutely. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so that's all I really have. I appreciate you guys putting in the effort. You know, this is exciting. I have 3 sisters who are also watching, so yeah, we're really happy. Thank you.
Great.
Mhm.
Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
contributing. All right. You want to go ahead to the next slide?
Yes. We have a
Okay.
David Kimmerly.
Okay, David, I think I just unmuted. Okay. David, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks for putting my grandfather's photo up there. He worked at Curtiss-Wright from approximately 1920 to approximately 1940. There were stories in the family that he worked for Wright Aeronautical, and in the 1920 census, it actually says on his place of employment that it was Wright Aero. It says, you know, in the small space on the census record. So that kind of confirms it. I don't have very much other than this photo and that group photo that I also shared of what I think is a Christmas party from about 1925. He is in the photo kind of back left, second row. And I think it's a Christmas party because there's in the foreground on the one desk, there's a calendar that says 1925, or I'm sorry, it says December. It says December. So I can't confirm it's 1925. There's no year on the calendar. But
It
he
looks like a
started at,
Christmas tree in the back there too.
what's that?
You have like a Christmas, it looks like tinsel and balls
Oh,
right
yeah,
there.
yeah. Right. There's also some gentlemen with musical instruments also in the group. And he started out as a draftsman. He learned drafting through correspondence school, through the mail, and he worked his way up to being an engineer by the time he left the company. I think it was probably sometime in the early 1940s he left the company. So.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's interesting that you mentioned the instruments because in the exhibit that we have here at the museum, we actually have both a picture of let me get it right. I think it was I don't know, it's not jazz band, but it's like I think it's
Grandstand.
Do you remember, Jack, what they're called? They have a funky name. They're
Yeah,
like
no, I don't.
banjo and that kind of style. And we have a picture of the orchestra. So there definitely were a lot of extracurricular groups that people were involved in within the Wrights community. So that's kind of fun.
It is. These are such special photos too, because this is somewhere where you could identify within, you know, yourselves. That's Awesome. Thank you so much, David.
You're welcome.
So we're gonna show Marilyn. Is she here?
Yep, Marilyn's right here. Hang on. Okay, Marilyn, you just need to unmute yourself if you have a mic. There we go.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted. We can hear you.
This is my dad, John Dunning, and tonight I believe that a few of his grandchildren are also listening on the program.
Oh, good.
My dad started as a trainee in 1937, which you have up there in the Paterson plant. He later moved to Woodridge, and as far as I know, those are the only two places where he worked. He definitely made pistons most of his life. He became a supervisor and was one for many years in the position. He retired in 1976. And also, which I haven't heard someone else speak about, but he was involved in the Curtiss-Wright Supervisory Retiree Group for many years. He said he joined that in 1980. He was elected president in 1983. And I know in the later years of his life, as the group got smaller and the retirees were dying off, they did meet about once a month. And I know my dad was known that when they got there, when he got there, they would come up to him and say, "The speaker canceled, John, can you do something?" And my dad would stand up there and have them singing and telling jokes, and just, he was that kind of person. He also, I think, he wanted to enlist in the Army. Two of his brothers served, and twice they said, "You have a necessary job. You may become a soldier." And I think underneath that really bothered him, although he knew his job was important. He really did want to enlist at the time. It was very important to serve. Another special memory is in later years, I was with my dad in Florida. We were at a music concert and a Tuskegee Airman was singing in his 90s. And in the end, I went up to the Tuskegee Airman and said, "Thank you for your service. It's wonderful to meet you. What kind of airplanes did you fly?" And he said, "Planes with Wright engines in them." And I said, "My dad may have made the pistons that you had in that plane." And he said, "Is he still here?" And I said, "He's coming down the hall." So it was time before phones. I couldn't take a picture, but they shook hands and they stood and talked together. And there was the man flying the plane and the man who had made the pistons probably that were in his engine. And it was a special moment.
Oh,
So my dad's entire life was at Curtiss-Wright, his entire working career. And one other thing I remembered, after he retired, which was mostly when the jet engines came in, he flew to the Midwest when commercial flight was pretty new in the 50s. I was young. I remember him going, and I think they had hired him. He went to teach somewhere else about what they were doing in the Woodridge plant. So he was used as a consultant or a trainer somewhere in the Midwest. And that's my dad in the second row, kind of squatting down, the second from the right.
Oh, yeah. This is is this a big panorama?
That's him. This is a long panorama picture that I was able to scan in 3 pieces. So there is a little bit of overlap. I know you'll be able to take it and kind of put it together. It's a 1968 outing of the Supervisory Council.
Oh, that's great. And there's so many people too. It's awesome.
All of these will be coming to you if you want them for your collection, because I think that's where they belong.
Sweet. How thoughtful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for letting us be able to contribute these to your collection and your historical exhibit.
Yes, thank you very much for contributing, and that goes to everybody. It's always, so fun to do something related to Wrights. I worked previously at the Passaic County Historical Society. That's how I know Marissa, and I'm more familiar with the collection. And we did a couple of events, and everyone who came out for them was just, you get the sense of that Wright's community still exists very much in the, the family of those who worked there. So it's really
And
nice.
it carried on in the retiree group also for many years.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Actually, I think the Paterson Museum, we have some items that were donated to us, and I believe that some of them were given to us at a retiree events. So, it went on and on. All right, so
You.
we have one more contributor, I think, Marissa, right?
Yes, we have
All right.
Diane.
Diane, do you want to raise your hand for me? Hopefully she's here.
Your digital 5.
I'm not seeing a raised hand, but we can look at the pictures anyway.
Yeah, so Diane sent these to you, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
And
The right, the silver square pin is really interesting because here at the museum, we have something very similar, but it says supervisor on it as well. But I didn't realize that it was for a picture. I figured it was for like an ID number or something, but that's neat that they did that.
That's a fancy little badge you walk around with. But Warren DeMoro was her father. There is her father. He was a Curtiss-Wright draftsman. So I wonder if he would have known any of the people that were in that singular draftsman photo that we did have, at least in these past folders. But there's probably more to come with that. But he worked, I believe, 42 years and 2 months. And he proudly never missed a day of work. So really, it's like the dedication of these employees that really caps, I think, Curtiss-Wright outstanding as a company in general. So it's the little Warren DeMoros and everybody of our attendee contributors, families that really make all the difference. And this is the gold that we get to look at every day, or at least I do, as we digitize the collection. I just love the photographic proof of these times.
So did she give us a caption for this one? Is this the retirees, or
Yeah, I believe that these are the friends that, yeah, the retiree group. He happens to be the third in the second row. Right here is Diane's father. But anybody else, if they recognize, we have another photo that we need ID. But yeah, so that's all that we have for the attendee contributors. But you guys could always send us more via email, or you could re-watch this seminar on the Paterson Museum Foundation's page. I'm very thankful that you guys helped us out, or even just hung out and watched through it at least, so that you get an idea of the type of information we're looking for. And hopefully there will be a third installation of this ID session.
definitely?
And I thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marissa. And thank you everybody who contributed to the program with their personal pictures. And, thank you very much to Peter for all of his contributions. We really hope, as I said before, that if you, know someone else who missed tonight who might be able to help us identify some of these photos, that you share the link. And as I said, we're going to give us a couple of days to get it up, but we're going to put it up on the Paterson Museum's YouTube channel. I just wanted to let everybody know before we go for the evening that we're going to have another Zoom meeting from the museum on November 18th, which is a Thursday, and that is going to be about the Paterson Farallon Weir. So we're going from Wright Aeronautical to the Lenape Indians, a big time shift, and that is going to be presented by Tony DeCondo, who is the Paterson Museum's archaeology advisor. So if you're interested in that program, please reach out. It's the same email for this one, and I will send you the link and make sure that you can contribute to that and take part in that program as well. Also, our partner, the Paterson Museum Foundation, as I mentioned in the beginning, who was sharing our the Zoom program with us tonight so that we could present. They are going to be having their first lecture in their lecture series on November 23rd, which is actually about the history of the Paterson Museum. And Giacomo DiStefano, I don't know who that is going to be presenting that lecture as well. So if you are interested in that, you can contact events@pattersonmuseumfoundation.com for the link, or you can reach out to me and I'll get your email in the right place. So once again, thank you all for contributing. We really appreciate your time. And everybody have a nice rest of your evening and a safe night. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you guys so much. I appreciate it
wonderful.
all.